I grew up in Australia for 18 years of my life. Then I lived overseas, traveled the world like a gypsy for 15 years. So where am I from? You don't need to be talented to be a good rugby player. I think you just can't beat guys who want to put their heads in dark places. In Fiji, the rugby players, they're breadwinners for their whole family. I can be that hot-headed guy making sure we get things done, in the way that obviously they understand it. But off the field is that empathy, making sure they're all right. It's just trying to find peace, and I don't care what anyone says. Retiring from professional sport has got to be the hardest thing anyone can do.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring. I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Nemani Nadolo. Nems, as he is known, is one of the most well-travelled professional rugby players in the game. A powerhouse winger, yet quick, agile, and an excellent goal kicker to boot. His playing journey has seen him represent NEC in Japan, Montpellier in France, Leicester in England, Crusaders in New Zealand, and the Fijian national team. He is reasonably new retired, and Nems has dabbled in business and commentating, and now is starting up his coaching journey, returning to Fiji, where he is the Fijian Drua development coach. Nems, welcome to the Coaching Culture podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour to be here, mate. So, thank you for taking a punt on old Nemi here.
Well, mate, it's a cool little journey you're on because you're right at the start of your coaching. You've been retired for about 3 years now. You've had that transition. Now you're rolling into the Fijian Drua development coach. Now, how's that, mate? What does that role entail, and how are you finding it?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm blessed in that sense to be part of one of the most proudest franchise, I guess, in Super Rugby. Everyone loves it, Drew. I guess it's everyone's second teams. To be the development coach, an opportunity came up. Was it late last year? We were I was like, yep, I took it. I didn't even see the contract, to be fair. I just agreed to it, and so we'd moved our whole family here. And hadn't signed anything. So we'd moved in August, said, yep, it was all verbal. And as you know, on the island, sometimes verbal takes a long time. Thankfully, I had my other job, which I'm still working out. And I didn't sign on till, I think, 2 weeks from a week before preseason started. And so, mate, that's just how much I love Fiji. And I guess being given the opportunity to give back is, being the development coach. And I think the best thing about coaching development is I get to work with young men, guys who want to aspire to be flying Fijians and play for the Drua. So it got my work cut out, that's for sure. But mate, it's tell you what, it gets me up every morning, and you do long hours, as you know, as coaching. We're up I'm up at 6, and then you don't get home till 6, 7. So the wife definitely sees it. I don't. I just. That's I do 12-hour days, and you don't even know it. That's how much I love it. So, but yeah, it's been a great journey so far, man. It's just been pretty cool.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? It's cool to see what are you finding like the biggest transition piece for you from playing to coaching? What are you finding hard? What are you finding your challenges?
I think, I wouldn't say challenge, more work on is how I transfer my knowledge to the players. So, in terms of how I see things and how I see the game in my mind. And this is where, I've learned to, from obviously older coaches, and I talk to a lot of the coaches and, get advice from them. And the biggest thing that, keeps getting told me is that I get told is the image and the way you see the game is different to the way someone else sees the game. So what I think might be, is easy to do, might be not a bit challenging, but might be that they have it a different way. So it's trying to find that language for me, is trying to find the language on how I transfer, my knowledge and how the game how I think the game's played, and like ways of how to play. And it's just trying to transfer that knowledge. And it's been challenging, but the good thing is I've got some good coaches that I work under at the Drua, and just, I'm like that leech. Like, I'm just always asking questions. I probably piss them off more times than anything because I sit in the coach. There's obviously Chris Gibbs, Tim Sampson, there's Greg, who's our forwards coach, and obviously Glenn Jackson. So we sit in the horseshoe. And obviously, Super Rugby, they're all tense. As you know, you're all in there, and obviously the development coach is here. And I help with the back three in defense. So I'm still doing a bit of stuff there. But, mate, you almost feel bad asking questions because they're like new ones. But, I'm big on a stupid question's a question never asked, Jamie. So, um, yeah, and like I said, I've learnt so much from them, and I'm the sort of person that I want to learn. Like, I'm a sponge, whether you're a club coach at Premier grade level or you're at the international level. I'm big on learning, and because one thing I realize is I'm a big believer that coaches should really get together and share knowledge, because rugby is literally played. Rugby is a simple game. Everyone just has their ways, but I'm a big believer in sitting down with you or sitting down with, John who coaches Jeeps down the road or some, and just having chewing the fat around rugby, how it's played, because, such, like I said, it's when you hear when you hear the mindset of how people see the game, I think it's lovely. I'm just big on learning right now. Yeah.
Mate, I love it. And I don't think you can go wrong with the questions either, by the way, because you want your players to be full of questions. If they've got
Yeah.
unsure, question. So as the example of the leader and the coach, surely you should be doing that as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think some of the best head coaches I know ask a lot of questions themselves.
Mm. And you've got to, like, because, you find now in the game, when you come up with something, you're always going to get questioned, like, okay, well, what's the outcome of this or what's that? And some, like I said, the there's always two sides to the coin, I feel. Like, if you run a play, why did you do that? Oh, yeah, someone might say because of this. Well, hold on, what about this guy? Who are we sitting? And, like, there's so many variables in the game. So that's what I love about, I love asking questions and just talking. Sometimes it might not make sense. It might not, I might not understand it, but like when we talk about scrums and lineouts, but, I listen.
Just push harder. That's all you need to do. That's how it rolls. And mate, you said this, which I think is a really interesting point. And I reckon it's really important when you start coaching is how do you learn to transfer what's in my mind to the players? Have you had any specific ways so far? I know it's still early days, but anything which has worked for you where you've gone, oh, that's a good way to get things across?
So I'm big on, like, so I like to show clips of what I'm thinking. So, like, say for instance, and this thing I learned too from other coaches, was finding, like, say for instance, a kick chase. So I'm big on the things that you don't teach, and I'm sure every coach is, where, like a kick chase, you don't need to teach that. You just need to have the attitude to chase the ball. So I would, if I find it hard to do it, I will find a clip from, it could be anywhere in the world, and be like, this is what I'm talking about, boys. So just stuff like that, trying to show image, like visual, particularly here in Fiji, where, like myself, Fijians, we're visual people. So we need to see it to learn it, if that makes sense.
So you can't like read it as well,
No.
generally speaking.
Yeah. Yes. And again, it's, Fiji people think, like, I grew up in the Australian rugby system. So, and then obviously I played rugby all over the world, but it's completely different to how rugby is played here in Fiji. You know what I mean? We're very relaxed people, but it's trying to find that, and I'm still trying to find it. It's trying to find that way to what makes them tick. Do you know what I mean? What makes them tick? What is it that gets them up? And so it's been a good challenge for me. And I'll be honest, like, yes, I'm Fijian. I'm full Fijian. My mum and dad Fijian, but I grew up in Australia. So coming back to Fiji, I'm still learning. I'm learning the game of how we play. And people may laugh at that and think, oh, well, you're a fake Fiji, or you're a plastic Fijian. But, it's not that easy. Like, the boys here, they play a different style, a different way. It's been a good learning for me as well.
Do you have to find your not only the Fijian way of playing rugby, but also the Fijian way of living and the culture? Do you have to get back into that side of things as well?
Yeah, 100%, 100%, Jamie. Like for instance, one thing I've realized here, and I've learned from guys, is that in Fiji, the rugby players, they're breadwinners for their whole family. Okay. So, you know how the biggest difference is like the dieting, the nutrition. We do our part and, we educate the boys on nutrition and whatnot. But our culture is what makes us different to, other teams. So, for instance, having a yogurt and berries and oats for breakfast, that's the norm. See, we wouldn't have that. We're teaching that to the boys, but as Fijians, we eat together. When it's not like I'll have oats and it's like we all eat together. Then we'll have a loaf of bread. So the food is different and how they eat. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's like a cultural thing with your family, like
Yeah,
you to go and eat muesli and berries and sort of a high performance athletic diet
yeah.
by
Where
yourself. It
where
doesn't.
you wouldn't do that here because it's like we're still because we are new to the professional game on Ireland. For 5 years it's the first professional setup or high performance team of any sport we've had on the island. We are still learning to 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 learn how to be professional athletes. So you can imagine the boys at the top squad now, they've been here for 5 years. They're now starting to know the effects of, okay, well, this is what it takes to be a professional rugby player. So can you imagine at the development end, when you've got kids straight out of the village or straight out of school, raw talent can burn you, can step you in a telephone box, but wouldn't know how to eat. They wouldn't know the nutrition side of things. Wouldn't know how to lift weights, but they've got 5% skin fall. You know what I mean? 5% body fat. It's that. And like, it's overwhelming at times because you're like, wow. And then that's that aspect. Then it's like the knowledge of the game. So it's, I always say, compare it to like in Australia or New Zealand. These guys are in the weights room at what, 14, 15, 16.
Yep. Yep.
You're in the setup there. And yeah, what's the youngest age where they start doing weights and powers and all that?
Well, mate, that's right. Well, we started at sort of 14 years old. The boys are into their not big weights, just body weight stuff. But by the time they are leaving school, some of those guys are ready to go into professional setups and be fine. They know all the lifts. They're all completely confident in the
All across,
gym
right?
across the board. Like they've trained in a professional setup at the schools here in Australia. It's unreal.
Yeah. So when they come to the development squad, it'll be like a 14-year-old teaching them again how to lift, how to stuff, what the nutrition is, what's a skin fold, what's your velocity jump, and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's exciting rugby players, like very, very talented, but it's that other side of being a professional rugby player, whereas we're still having to catch up, and that's going to come over time. It's just the way it is here, but it's great. It's a good challenge, especially for me. Like I said, trying to tell these guys, trainings. It's more. I always tell people we're coaching, but we're also teachers as well. Like
Hmm.
coaching rugby. So you're teaching them how to play rugby, but you're also teaching them about life, what it's like to be a professional rugby player. And the biggest thing I'm big on here at Drua is teaching them to be good men off the field.
Is that an issue?
Well, yes, I think because, well, they come straight out of, some of them will come from the village and they'll go into, we live in Nundy, so it's a very touristy town and whatnot. So it's, it's just trying to teach them like being aware of things, and it's like, okay, yes, everyone likes a beer, and everyone wants to drink, but it's trying to, how do you, I love beer. As you know, in Japan, I bloody drink till the
Well, you're the example, mate. You had 15 years playing professionally and
yeah,
some up and down periods, right? So you know
yeah.
very well
But,
firsthand. And yeah.
Jamie, the good thing is like, when I see that, it's one thing I've learned. It's just, I was in that shoe. I was in their place before one time. Do you know what I mean? So it's trying to balance things as well as a coach, but not as a coach, but also as a human side as well. A lot of these guys come from nothing. They, like I said, they're breadwinners for their family. So it's like, okay, we got to make sure first that their well being is okay. that they're all right, then, okay, then let's go play rugby, if that makes sense.
So part of your role in this development team is just is a lot of it is sort of sharing your experiences too, right? Like just because you've
Yeah.
been there, you've been in their shoes, you understand it, you understand the whole process from when they start to 15 years later when they retire, and then they have their transition to the next. You've done that, so that's the value in a development coach of someone that's been there, done that, right? Like you're coaching everything about the professional athlete becoming professional. And here's a few tips, here's a few pointers, here's a few potholes you might hit along the way. Here's something to think about. Here's a good agent, here's a bad one. Here's all that stuff, right?
Exactly right, and, even with agents, so, like, guys the boys are coming to me about agents, like, advice around agents, and as you know, it can be wild west here, and, so a lot of it, and you're right, a lot of it is just me sharing my experiences. And I always tell them my walk and your walk are two different, but if you can hear my side of the story, that way you might get an insight into what you're going through. And I can guarantee you, in my short time here, there's 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 issues that we face as a squad and stuff that I haven't been through before. You know what I mean? So, and that's what excites me as well, is because I've been in those shoes. And like for instance, a lot of these guys would finish school and they would come straight into a professional setup. So I've set up, what I've done is one day a week, I send them out to go to work. So they go work for a one of our sponsors, which is a water company, right? So all the development players, one day a week, they get in the truck and they go deliver water all over Fiji, and they'll
Man,
come back
that's
to
like
train.
weightlifting, right? Like that's like 50
Yeah.
kilos a pop, right?
Well, so yeah, like, and yeah, it's 15 kilos. So over time, I'm sure it's going to get heavy. Just and like that as well. That's life, lessons. And I think, because I didn't make it straight out of high school. I had to go to work, and I understood what that work is. You have to work for your money. And so to teach these guys that at this stage of their career, like they're going out to do heavy labor, like manual labor, and it teaches them another side that if you don't play rugby, if you don't take this seriously, or if rugby doesn't work out, you've got to find a plan B. So, and another thing I'm trying to bring into is studying, trying to find work with, local polytechs and stuff here where we can do Cert 3s and stuff so that, when our boys do finish, they've got a Cert 3 in, plumbing, or Cert 3 in something, construction or something. So I'm not only preparing them to be rugby players, but I'm also preparing them to be human beings outside of the game, and know that it's not just right. Because, right, like in Fiji, our goal when we grow up is we want to play Fiji. And I've realized that we want to play rugby. We want to go out, and that's fun and all, and I'm all for that. But then the question is, what happens if you don't? And this is where I'm trying to bridge that gap. And and it's good. You can see a bit of change. Guys are like starting to ask questions about, okay, well, can I do a construction? Can I do a electrician course or something here? So and I kind of, that for me is the biggest. Like I get a kick out of that.
Yeah. I think that's amazing, mate. And I think it's important that you have people there. And rugby's a good context to have it there too, because
Mm.
you can't train like in a rugby team like you train for other sports just because of the physical requirements. You can't train for 8 hours straight.
Yeah,
Although some Japanese team we were with often gave that a good nudge, but on the
like
whole, you can't.
exactly.
But yeah, so like other sports, like a lot of sports like swimming, where there's a lot of repetition, you can just go and go and go. And it's just about volume, cycling, running. There's just a volume piece. Whereas rugby, you can't, because you will break if you train more than. And so you've got this other time, right, to then work on the other bit of rugby, because it's a human game, it's an emotional game, it's a chaotic game, which is like life, right? So it's the same
Yeah,
skills that you're preparing for a game is actually very balanced with life.
yeah.
Now, one thing we were talking about off the NMs, which I hope you don't mind me asking, mate, is just this transition that you had, like, and everyone has, and it's a fascinating one for coaches just to be aware of, I reckon, when players transition from professional careers. And I've seen it myself. I've been through it, and I think it's all professional players, but not even professional. It's all players. When you stop playing rugby and that camaraderie, the identity, the sort of easily definable purpose for what you're doing changes, right? Like, and you've got to go through a little transitioning period where you're redefining your identity, who you are now that you're not a rugby player first and foremost. How's that journey been, mate? I know it's still fresh for you. How do you find it?
Yeah, I'd like to think I'm sort of at the end of that. I'm coming towards the end of that life, trying to find your feet after rugby. And, I remember when I was at the Waratahs in 2023, which was my last club. Ironically, it was my first club. But anyway, so I had an opportunity to go to Japan to play for a year there. So we're in negotiations with the clubs there, and then I'd hit 35, and I always said if I could ever make it to 35, I'd live. It was the right time for me. I had a few injuries, but I reckon if I could probably still soldier on. But I, for me, I knew that I was going to retire, and I didn't want to delay the inevitable. So it was fun. Like I said off air, 2 weeks after I retired, I'd started work. Like I literally went from that to that into the office. I was a assistant to HR, and I just stopped rugby. Like for a whole year, I stopped watching it. Didn't care too much about it. And then, I'd go down and try and play club rugby, but just wasn't for me. And yeah, I just jumped. I jumped from that to I had a lawn mowing business. And then after that, I went from lawn mowing business, cutting grass, and that was pretty lonely. Probably not the best thing to do after you've retired, where you're already hating the world and you're now in. So I was cutting people's grass, and you're getting the odd worst customer in the world, whatever. You're getting, and you just take it with it goes. But then, yeah, it was hard. Like you're trying to find yourself. Rugby finishes, and my way of sort of trying to escape things or like trying to get away is trying to just move on and try and keep myself busy. So that's what I did. I went myself busy to the point where I just had enough and my body just gave out. I just couldn't take it, physically exhausted. And then it wasn't until I sort of moved to Melbourne. So we moved to Melbourne. I was originally from Brisbane. I said, look, let's get out of here. Let's go to Melbourne. Let's just start fresh. And even there was probably testing times as well, trying to find yourself, and rugby wasn't big. And so I played a bit of club, but then I coached down there. That's where I started coaching. And then, yeah, I started work and then worked for this recruitment company that I'm still with today. And we moved here, and then, yeah, just things escalated to where I am now. But, it's just trying to find peace, and I don't care what anyone says. Retiring from professional sport or in general has got to be the hardest thing anyone can do. Particularly like, I played rugby professionally for 15 years of my life, so I gave it a good crack. And, I knew that there was life after rugby, but I didn't think it'd hit me that hard. And now we're 2026. And like I said, I've been fortunate enough now. I'm in a good place now. I love what I do. I get to wake up each day. Like I said to you earlier, I'm putting in long hours, 6 to 6 as a coach, but I love it. Like I don't, like my wife is calling me up going, where are you? We're home for dinner. Like and that's another thing too I've got to work on is, at the end, I'm a husband first and I'm a father. But yeah, man, who would have thought? Yeah.
What would you recommend, mate? What would your advice be, looking back now that you're in the development space, when players come to the end? What advice would you take based on your experience of retirement?
Take time off. And I think that's what I didn't do. And I said that I would take time off. Whatever you do, try and take, 4 or 5 months. If you're for guys who are retiring, I didn't. And that's probably where I worked myself into the ground because I just wanted to forget about it and reflect on what you've been through. Like till today, I haven't reflected on, my career and what I've done. And it's not until someone will tag me in it or I'll come across a video that someone, made. And you're like, oh, like I saw one the other day, the Prem Rugby for Leicester. Someone put it, the streets will never forget, and then my name. And then there's a few snippets of my time there, and it was like, geez, I actually moved all right. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe not now, I'm not moving all right, but just, yeah. And I never got to do that. And again, now life is, I'm so focused on my role now. It's like, I wish I did that. And maybe one day, like you said, maybe one day when my son's a bit older, I can share with him. But yeah, if I was to give any advice to anyone retiring, take time off, be around your loved ones, and enjoy what you did, whether you played for 3 years or 2 years or 15 years. Reflect it. If you got YouTube highlights, I wish I did. I mean, like it's right there, but I just don't have. I'm always like it's and it. I find it hard now at this stage now to sort of sit down and have that. Like I talk about it, but maybe it's just hard for me to sit down and do it. You know what I mean?
I think when you put that retirement thing into perspective, for a normal life, retirement's at 65 in most Western
Yeah,
countries, and that's the end of the road, really. Like essentially, you've been put out to pasture. In that
exactly.
context, you've worked a career of 40 years. You've been retired in a lot of cases, and then you're on the slow decline. Whereas when you're talking professional sport, that same thing is happening, but when you're 30 or 35 in your case, which
Yeah,
is long, and then you're having to deal with, you're actually not on the downhill. You're not put
yeah,
out to pasture. You got to start a new career and start again. And I think what you're talking about there too reminds me of like just you've chased something hard and got to the top of where you are in your case, and you've pushed and pushed to the best of your ability, and then you've got to start again. And that's quite a confronting thing for anybody to take. You got to start again. So what you talked about is just taking a little bit of time to go, actually just pause, look back and smile. You're at the top of the mountain and you're looking down and you go, right, I'm going to have to go walk down there now and then start again walking up the next one.
it's so true because I remember when I took this coaching, I was the assistant coach to a team in Melbourne called Box Hill Rugby Club, and anyone that knows rugby in Melbourne, like most rugby is struggling in Melbourne, like in terms of getting numbers and whatnot. Man, Jamie, there'll be times where there would be like 5 people rock up to training, 6 people, and you're just there like on a Tuesday night. It's cold. You get 7, you're just like, what am I doing? And then you're like, maybe coaching isn't for me. And even that sense, I'm glad that I got to coach there, even though I probably hated it at the time, because it got me to realize that, hey, if you can get through this, then, you'll be all right. Now I'm at that stage of my career. Even that, when I started there, I was like already looking up the hill and going, okay, maybe can it be achieved? You know what I mean? So you start asking questions, and then I'm thankful that I'm in this situation that Drew are. The hunger to want to get better is there. Like the same hunger I did as a rugby player has transferred now to the coaching realms. And like, it's kind of like raw because I've got to harness it because the excitement and the energy is there, but it's like, hold on. I'm coaching people. I'm telling people how to play rugby. It's not me telling me what to do, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
the mind's crazy in that sense. And I've got that energy now. I've got that drive to want to be good, want to be the best coach that Nemani can be. Not that anyone else, but Nemani can be.
Love it, mate. And who on your way so far, mate, sort of inspired you? Who's the you've been for 15 years across some of the best teams around the world, mate. You've had good stints at some pretty big clubs.
Yeah.
Well, who's had some impact on you coaching wise, and what lessons have you picked up from that pretty diverse set of experiences you've had?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest one rugby wise was like my time at Leicester Tigers. So Steve Borthwick and Kevin Sinfield, who are now the England coaches, I still think, and Richard Wigglesworth. Like it was when I went to Leicester, what really inspired me to be like, to give this coaching a go. I remember speaking to Steve Borthwick, and I was like, and I said to him, I said, "Do you see me as a coach?" Like literally, just a question. He's like, "I do," and I was like, I don't know if anyone who knows Steve, he's stern and when he talks, and he's trying to get a smile out of Steve is probably is rare these days, but. I took a lot out of those guys and how they coached the game and how they saw the game. And I always tell people, I wish I sort of moved to Leicester or the UK earlier in my career because I can tell you now, I probably learnt so much more in that 2 years that I was there than I probably did in my career
What
of
in
how
what
to play.
ways?
Just in like the purpose of kicking, like I feel there's not enough emphasis on why we kick and where we kick. So when we had when I was at Leicester, we had George Ford and Steve Borthwick, and the way they structured like our kicking game. If anyone, when we won it that year, we kicked the most in the competition. I think I ran more meters without the board than I did in anywhere in the world because we just kick chase. And I hated that. But then I realized why we kicked it. I realized we had to kick to this point because this guy's, he doesn't step well, or he doesn't move well down this corner. And there was like, it was either like a box kick or grubbers. So, like we really dissected teams in that sense. And we were big on the kicking game. And I think I hated the kicking game. That's one example of how the way I saw the game. And then all of a sudden, now I always see when I see George Ford play, and I'm big on how he plays now. He kicks and everyone's like, "Oh, they kick too much." But then there's an outcome that they get when they do those kicks, and it was just, and also too, like Leicester, you were there, not the most skillful teams, but just hard, and it's funny because I bring some of that here to our boys. Like we do, I say, boys, we got contact, and they're like, we probably do more contact because there's only like obviously 12 of us. So, so I bought a lot of that. And I think you just can't beat guys who want to put their heads in, in dark places. You can't, if you can get guys like that, you yourself was like that. You're just crazy when you play, and that's what I'm trying to, that's what I've taken out at Leicester in my time at Leicester is that, you don't need to be talented to be a good rugby player, if that makes sense.
That's very true, mate. I think there's some art in that, and that's the art of coaching rugby too, a little bit. How do you draw that out of someone, that dark art stuff? How do you make someone
Yeah,
that doesn't want to put the head over a ball and potentially get whacked in it to do that when it's not their instinct?
exactly right.
It's a challenge. You would argue it's not a technical thing. It's a
No,
bravery thing, and you're coaching bravery, which is a very different thing to be coaching than a skill set.
and it's hard too. Like you've got to, like I said, everyone's different. So it's trying to get it out of the individuals. And Steve Borthwick did that. He got the best out of players. Like,
How did he do it? How was his style
so
when he was?
I don't know how he did with other players, but with me, he would like, and he would come up to me and he would get to know me and my family. So COVID here, we just had a newborn, and and so as you know, when you're a young father, it's your family, right? He would be very, he'd get the best out of me by always having conversations where it involved my family. How's your wife? How's your son? There'll be times where I'd be like, mate, listen, he'd be like, hey, well, I haven't had good sleep, or my wife's doing it tough, and he would find a way, and it could be as simple as, sweet, after after our install, go home, go be with your
Oh, he would
family.
actually say that? Like, get
Yeah.
you gone?
Yeah, he would come up to me. I remember when Ethan was just born, we just moved over, COVID, no family, and we were doing it tough a little bit. It was just me and Kim and the little one. And as you know, in the UK, when it's winter, it Leicester especially, we travel from Melton Mowbray, which is like a good fair whack to get into bloody Wigston Fold. Was it what's it called? What was it where they
OB,
train? Oadby, Wigston Oval.
OB.
Yeah, like there'll be days where I'll be struggling, and he'd just be like, "Mate, yep, do what you need to do, go home." And then, like just stuff like that would like just trigger me and like just be like, man, this guy cares about me.
Mm.
Like he actually, and then you keep doing it, you keep doing like anything else, snowball effect. Got to the season, he would know that I wasn't like, because I went out to the end of my career, he'd be like, Nems, you're not running, you don't do this, but he'll still work me. And then, but he'd just be like, get your body right for the weekend. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, I mean, obviously the way he did with me was different to other people. And this is why I respect the man. And, I try and get a lot of my coaching out of like the way I coach or try to coach from him. And it was getting to know his players, and when he got
Mm.
to know his players, and then all of a sudden it was just like, what I started seeing in myself was like, I started getting better. Like I started to do extras. I started to do more. because he was like, "Nah, you look after your family." This and then I'd be, yeah, I just there was a way that he got. That's how he got the best out of me, and then all of a sudden you're this guy who's going through a brick wall for someone who simply just says, "How's your family?" and cares about how you're going and your well being. And he was big on that. There was well being first, and he especially like young fathers. He was really good with. He's a father. He has two boys, and he can just be like a 10-second conversation, Jamie, and that was it.
Mm.
Right, boom. You know,
Well, I reckon that's cool, mate. It's almost like this concept of you're coaching care, and what
yeah,
I've heard there. Like he's actually coaching the fundamentals of caring. And what I got from you just then, mate, was it's not a one size fits all approach, which you could easily think it would be, but it's not. There's lots of different hats, lots of different shapes and sizes of hats you have to wear, and different people take different hats, and they all look good in their own way, right? And you have to be aware of that. I often go back to that sort of phrase as like with your parenting, like we have 4 kids and there's no way I should treat them all the same because they're not the
yeah,
same. They're very different and they wouldn't want to be treated the same. Sometimes when
exactly.
my little fella goes, "Why do I have to go to bed early? My sister doesn't have to go to bed at 8 o'clock." And I go, "Hold on, mate. Do you really want me to treat you like your sister? Because I can do that." And he'd think about it for a second and go, "Actually, nah,
Nah,
no, 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 no." Because
I've
there's
had it. Yeah,
differences, right? And it's because, like, you care about those differences because everyone's unique. People are different. It's coaching is a people business, right? And you've got to make those considerations for the difference.
and it's fun. It's works so well. Like the role that I'm in now, and I'm still learning how to do it. Learning how to be. For me, it's like more empathy. How to Because for me, I'm like that mindset. We've got to train. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. But then and the good thing we've got, like I said, we had a conversation with our GM, Baden Stevenson, who's our GM, and we're talking about a play, and I was like, "No, no, we got to get rid of him. He's not listening. Got listening." And the best thing he said to me, he sat me down. He goes, "Nems, put yourself in his shoes." And then all of a sudden, my mindset just went from trying to be a perfect rugby team to, "Oh, you're right. I got to show this guy some love, some empathy." And you know what though? Now it's like hearing his backstory, what happened to him, and what's he going through. All of a sudden, it's like, man, I got to care more about this guy more than rugby. Like, forget about rugby and coaching rugby first. Let's let's make sure he's okay, because as you know, if he is okay, the rugby is just the unproduct. The byproduct. We know you're good rugby players, and that's what I've sort of is my work on here. It's like, man, I got to show empathy. I got to make sure these guys are good. But yet, when we step over that line and it's rugby, because that's the only time, and that's how I've sort of phased. It's like, okay, let's make sure we're teaching these guys and coaching these guys. But the moment, because they've got to get past by medicals that they can train, the moment you're over that line, then it's all right. Now we're playing coach. Now I can be rough. You're going to not rough, but you know what I mean. It's like I can be that hot-headed guy making sure we get things done, in the way that obviously they understand it. But off the field is that empathy, making sure they're all right, but also, just making sure that their mindset is in a good state to train and get better. Does that make
Mm.
sense? So,
It does, mate.
and that's what's been crazy here. Like, and I'm a young coach. I'm learning just as much as they are, but at the same time, it's like leaning to my experiences, which is it's sort of helped me get through.
How do you, with your experiences, like you have a pretty unique experience, and just given some of your physical attributes, you're a massive man. I won't say the weights publicly, mate, but not these days. We let's just put they're north of a they're two of me. I didn't say the number, but mate, you're a big man, very big man, one of the biggest ever, and you're quick, mate, and one of the quickest out there in your prime, and you're agile, and you're a goal kicker, and you had these unique abilities physically, mate, just like blessed. How do you then sometimes relate to players that don't have those? Like, is it easy? Like when you talk about running into contact, for you, running into contact was a very different scenario than me,
Yeah,
for example. How do you
yeah.
relate to your players from your own experiences with that?
Well, what I do first of all, like I said, if I always go back to how I was sort of, because like you said, I was a big person for my position, but In the past, a lot of coaches would put me in the same category as my counterparts. You got to do this. You got to run this, as you know, at NEC. You've got to do the same thing. What I could do is different to what old mate can do, and what he can do is different to what I could do. And like that's worked well for me here because it's made me like we've got some big players, but like some of them are, some of them are big, but not. Sorry, some of them are big but quick, and you got some of the small guys who aren't big but are slow. You know what I mean? So it's like it's not putting them all in the one basket. It's not putting them all in the one bracket. And a lot of the things I do a lot of one-on-ones with them, and just go through their game and where they could work on. I'm not big on because that's how it worked for me. Like the guys will take coaches, the good coaches that I've played under will take me aside and be like, "Yeah, we know you're not this, we know you're not that, but we know what you can bring. So let's work on that. Let's
Mm,
bring that." A lot of teams, a lot of times in the past, people try to bring people's weaknesses rather than their strengths.
yes.
And so, like, I think if you can give, so once, for instance, we've got a lock who's about 7'8". He's big, he's tall. He might not be the quickest, might not be the skillfulest, but in contact, he goes well. But in a scrum jammy, you would want him every day of the week as a
Mm,
tight head. So it's like reminding him that that's what his strengths is. Okay. So I always try and remind them of their strengths and tell them like, and they work on, I don't like saying the word weaknesses. I say work ons. So for instance, like him, I say, mate, yes, you might not be the fittest, but you bring these other attributes. We can work on them. There's ways to work on that. Let's keep working on your strength. And the moment you see them, they evolve their game because they're working on their strength. We always get told back in the days, work on your weaknesses, forget your strength. I do the opposite. Well, hold on, work on your strength. The weaknesses, you can slowly chip away at your weaknesses or your work ons, is what I say. And again, that's just from my experiences as a player, and I was always told you're too slow, you're this and that, until I went to like Japan. And I got a lot of good feedback when I worked under the Kiwi coaches because they saw that, yes, you're big. Yeah, we know you're not going to be the quickest, but what's your goal? What's the goal of a winger? To score tries, to finish, all right? That's what they do. So they would say, "Nem, score tries." Obviously you're not going to be the quickest, but you're going to be you're going to be quick over a certain amount of times. Let's work on that. So all of a sudden, I started being the best over 40 meters. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
Sort of jumping across, but what I'm saying with our boys is, I just always tell them, keep working on your strength, keep working what got you here. We can work on that other stuff,
Yeah.
and and the good thing about this development squad that I've got, Jamie, is that they're a squad that wants to work. I in the past we sort of used to train together before I came. I came in this year and I've taken that away. So we train a different. We don't train with the top squad. So all of a sudden you've got some development lads that are like chewing at it, like we want to play, we want to train. All of a sudden they're training now 5, 6 days a week. They only train, because of the rules. They can only train a certain amount of days a week, but they're always in doing extras. And it's just sometimes flicking that switch or in them, or sparking a flame, and it just goes. And yeah, like I said, it's just I'm big on your strengths. Work on your strengths. If that's your strengths, that's what makes you you. Do it.
Mm,
So work-ons will come, and it'll come over time. No one's expecting it to happen straight away. You know what I mean? And I dare say, Jamie, for 15 years, I was probably working on my work-ons, on my weaknesses. But hey, I got 15 years out of it.
well, I think the example that is very fitting for you is when you first came to Japan. I was coaching there, that team. I saw it firsthand when you arrived, and you're 140 kilos or so, and the coaches in Japan were expecting everyone to hit certain thresholds in the 3K test, and you were up against the other wingers who were about 70 kilos, and
50. Yeah.
as expected, you were getting absolutely blitzed. And then there was this push for you to do more running in order to get down to that time, which was never going to happen. And we had a great trainer, Keith Roberts, who pushed hard to
Oh,
ensure
bless.
that this is ridiculous. He is different from those other wingers. We can't expect him to run the same. He's not doing any more running. I'll get him a fit for purpose, which was like what you said specifically for you, which was different sorts of fitness. And he worked really hard with you. And you absolutely got there. Were the top try scorer in your debut season. 19 tries, I believe, in the
Yeah.
season, which was the record. I think it still is. But it's a good example of that. Like, don't get bogged down in the weaknesses, because if you'd got to that, you would have been broken. You would have been broken mentally and physically, and you wouldn't have been doing what you're good at, which was scoring the tries, I reckon. So it's massive. It's absolutely massive. And I love that phrase you said, put yourself in his shoes. That's a lovely one too, just earlier around that coach and care. I just think that's a cool
Yeah.
little builder. Now, mate, what are the differences when you're talking about that little bit of the strengths of places you've been to? Like, if you're comparing a New Zealand style, you mentioned New Zealand coaches just before, and you've mentioned the Borthwick at UK. What about some of those other trades, mate? What's the differences now that you're taking from the Crusaders, from Leicester to Montpellier to NEC? What are you bringing back to your role now, apart from the contact from the English?
Okay, I'll go through all the teams and I'll tell you what I've taken out of them.
Yes.
Crusaders. So I'll start with the Crusaders. Crusaders, nailing your roles off the field, getting in the books, like the theory part of it. I didn't know what video was until I went to the Crusaders. Obviously, we had it in Japan, but it wasn't really, we didn't have computers and stuff. There was like what you showed us. All right, let's go. We'll see you at 12 o'clock on, what I mean? Like, it wasn't, the Crusaders was big on that. And that's one thing I've brought here to my development guys, because of how we train, is getting into the books, getting into the videos, watching the plays, watching back. Because perfect example, we played last week. How we had a development game, but then some of the guys from the top squad came down, and so we only came together on Friday, which was captain's run, because we trained different to the top squad. And so from Monday to Friday, I drilled it into the boys. I said, boys, we don't have enough to run a 15 during the week. We're still going to train hard. The plays that we're going to do, we mirror what the top squad is doing, who they'll play Moana that week. We're mirroring their plays. Part of my job was, taken care of in the fact that we mirrored the plays, what the top squad is doing. And I said, get in the books. You're going to have to learn. And I said, and I put on them. The only way I know that we're going to have a successful weekend is if you've done your books. Funny enough, Jamie, keep reminding them, boom, come Friday, we're crisp. So that's one thing I've taken away from the Crusaders is nailing your roles. That'd be the word for it. And that was a word that always was brought up when I was there. It was nail your role. In Japan, and of hard work, knowing that you've got to work hard.
Isn't it an amazing culture for that, right? Like,
Yes.
its work ethic is unmatched in a lot of ways, right?
But appreciating that people had to go to work and have to come train. So that's one thing I took out of Japan, which I bought here, which is, I guess, I've sent our boys go to work one day a week. What's another club? Leicester, good. The Montpellier, not a bad life in the south of France. So we've already got a good here too. So that was that. Yes, there's hard work, but then there's time to chill out and stuff. We do that really well, I must add. Maybe a bit too much. And then with Leicester was just the one thing I've learned and I've brought back here is understanding why we play what we play. And just like we played this development team on the weekend, and I was watching these flips and how they played, and I was like, right, in our 22, we're not going to play around with it. We're kicking it out. We're going to back our line out from anywhere from our fifth, because we love quick tap, as you know, Fijians love it. So from our try line to the 50, no quick taps. We're backing our line out. You know what I mean? And then anything over the 50 meters, we can quick tap, happy days. Funny enough, to actually see it happen and see it, obviously sometimes they didn't execute somewhere else, but then they got the picture of the understanding. Jamie, it's such a good thing as a coach. Like, now I know how coaches feel when you see something that you've planned and you're like, oh my God, it's actually working.
Except you don't say it like that, right? You don't say, oh my God, it actually worked.
No, yeah. I say it after, well, now I'm saying it on this. Jesus, it's going to make it go viral. But you get what I mean. So coaches listening, this is, and again, like I said, I'm new, I'm fresh and hungry. So to see that on the weekend, but yeah, just learning where to play, when to play, and what to play. So it's like, in our halves. And now I'm big on like, we don't want to mess around depending on who we're playing as well. So yeah, I've taken a lot of bits and pieces from where I've played. And like I said, I go back to my experiences. That's all it. That's all. If there's something when they talk about pressure, boom, I'll what's that time when I was at the Crusaders where in that era, there were just your Dan Carters, your Richie McCaws and all that, right? So that was pressure and just, like in how they face pressure or, how do you, there's, like I said, there's just so much, and people like, I like to think I'm probably I'm lucky to have the rugby career that I did because not many people would have had the career that I had where, how people, when they change clubs, they usually maybe go to up the road or they'll go, not far away. Every time I changed clubs, I actually changed countries. So we actually had to move countries as opposed to, oh, I'm playing for this team, this rival team. Do you get what I mean?
Mm.
So yeah, like I just said, everything I'm doing is just from experience and,
It's mate, I love that. Like the moving around just opens up that experience, a life experience even more. Mate, if you had to narrow down and say, what's one simple habit that would you say to a young player from your experience that would help them succeed long term, what would that be?
consistency. I say this word to my players all the time: consistency. I'll be greedy and I'll choose and I'll go with another word. Will be effort. Those are the two things that I would tell young people that I'd tell myself as well. Consistency and effort. It's funny because I actually say that to myself now in the position that I'm at. We talk about being at the top of the mountain and you being at the bottom. And I tell the development boys all the time: small habits, small things, doing it consistently over time. It's eventually going to get big, right? It might not get big now, might not get big in a year, but it will get big and time will come and then effort. And that's what again, I'm teaching our boys: effort you can't coach, and effort is something that comes from within, I guess. And it's finding, for me as a coach, it's finding what's going to fuel that effort through with the boys. You know what I mean? Like for instance, mine is my family. That's my fuel that's going to give me effort. And a lot of these guys are breadwinners in their families. It's reminding them again. It's trying to find ways of trying to find the fuel to fuel that effort, if that makes sense. So, I tell them all the time: consistent effort. Keep doing that every day. Surely something's going to pay off.
Something will happen for sure.
Yeah,
Now, Nems, we've got to the point where I've got one more question for you.
yeah,
Well,
nice.
a question for you, and it's this, mate. What's one belief you have about rugby or culture or even life that you believe in that you reckon other contemporaries of yours, peers or friends, would disagree with?
That's a very deep question, Jamie.
We go deep here, mate. We go deep because it just makes people think. And while you're having to tick over that, the reason why we do it too is the amount of people that have come back to me and just said, this is how I'd answer that question is really cool in day-to-day life when I bump into people that listen to the podcast and
Yeah,
they tell me their thing. And it's one of those sign-off questions which just makes you think, what would mine be? And the fact that you're having to go, ooh, that's an interesting one. What's one
yeah.
belief that you agree with that you reckon your contemporaries would disagree with?
I reckon what you coach in one country or in another place may not work in another place, if that makes sense.
It does. What specifically?
So, say perfect example, Fiji. There is a different way to coaching. And I don't know what the answer is as well, but like, well, let's for instance, coaches might come, what they might do in other places could be anything, might not necessarily work in another country. So for instance, if me coaching in Fiji, what I'm doing now, or how I'm coaching my development squad, wouldn't work in Australia or New Zealand because here we're not only coaches but we're teachers as well. Like you said, in Australia, by the time they're 14, they're lifting up dumbbells, right? So what might not necessarily work, what necessarily works here for what works here for us might not necessarily work in Australia or New Zealand.
Mm.
And that got for me, and I've learned that as a player, and as a coach now, and coaching here and having played in other countries, I think it's the same. I don't think you can, and whatever the answer, like, how do you change that? I don't know. I'm in the same boat, but one thing I've realized is you've got it. Yeah, you can't coach the same thing. That makes sense.
I actually agree with that, Nems. I think this is probably what the show is really about, is this concept that if you're coaching the sport, if you're coaching rugby, that's all the same. But we're not coaching rugby. We're coaching
No.
people rugby. And
Yeah.
the people comes in the middle, and people are all different. There's a whole lot of context to people. People are human, and humans aren't linear. They're all over the show. There's some things you can get right, but for the other things, you're going to have to be very careful that you're not getting it completely wrong. And so when you're coaching people, the sport, it changes everywhere you go. And there's cultures, there's context, there's all sorts of different things that are rattling around on people's backstories, which affect that part of the coaching process.
And don't get me wrong, like, I'm still learning the way we play here. Like, yeah, people think, yes, I played for Fiji. No, it's true though. Like, and I tell people, like, I played for Fiji for over 10 years, but I was only in the country for 3 weeks of the month. You know what I mean? But it's not until you move here, and that's why I take my hat off to guys like Glenn Jackson and Mick Burns, who who have been here, right? And they've been here for, like, they've in, immersed themselves in the culture. They've immersed themselves here, and do they get it right? Do they get it wrong? But it's not me to answer. But they've brought themselves out of New Zealand or Australia, brought them here, and have changed, the way they go about things. And they've, for me, I think they're doing a great. So it's not only, again, like I said, I'm still learning the ways of the Fijian ways here. And people, I know it sounds weird, right? But I grew up in Australia for 18 years of my life. Then I lived overseas, traveled the world like a gypsy for 15 years. So where am I from? I don't know. But,
Man of the world, Nams.
man of the world.
Love it. Now, mate, I want to wrap up the show with my final 3 takeaways, mate, that I've got enormous value out of this conversation. They are these. Number 1, you said, how do I learn how to transfer what's in my mind to the players? And I reckon that's a great question for all coaches to actually chip around how to do this. It's a great question. It's a great thinking process for coaches. Don't assume that because it's in your mind, it's going to come across the way you want it. How do you learn to transfer what's in my mind to the players? Repeat that question to yourself and you'll find you'll come up with ways. Number 2, work on your strengths. Don't always look for the weaknesses to work on. It's what got you here. It's why you're picked in the team. It's your absolute superpower. Double down on it. Make sure that's always your superpower, because working on your weaknesses isn't the thing that got you in the team. Your strengths are what got you here. Make sure they're still here and they're strong. Number 3, I just love this little phrase you said, mate, of take time to reflect. And you were talking about it in the transition period, but I think we can take it for all areas of life and the sport. When you get to the top of whatever mountain you're climbing, whether that's a session or a season or a career, make sure you take the time to just stop and have a look at the view you've got. Because if you're not in that present, you're going to miss the wonderful things that the view shows you. So taking that time to just be really present, to take time to reflect in a session, in a season, in a life, is massively important. Nemani Nadolo, what a pleasure to have you here on the Coaching Culture Podcast.
Thanks for having us.